External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar held that bilateral with Sergey Lavrov earlier today. The Russian Foreign Minister, also well known as one of Russian President Vladimir Putin's right-hand men, was here, and he, like I said, began his public engagements by attacking all of the Western delegations and basically saying that they've been blackmailing other economies. In his briefing, Lavrov not only lauded India and Prime Minister Modi's role in governance as the Ukraine war shadow loomed across the globe, but continuing his tirade against the Western nations, Lavrov claimed that it was the West, especially the United States and the UK, that had derailed peace talks between Russia and Ukraine and had been amping up pressure to isolate Russia from the rest of the world. External Affairs Minister Jaishankar also addressed the global impact of the war that has been raging for over 12 months now. Jaishankar stated that while the G20 focused on strengthening multilateralism, the war's impact has largely affected the global south. And he very tellingly said, it is this war that has meant no joint communique, no joint consensus has been involved at the G20 so far.
You know, is the conflict impacting the global south? Of course it is. I mean, it's not something new. In fact, India has been saying this very strongly for pretty much close to a year, that you know, this is affecting. In fact, today in my own session, I actually used the word saying, for much of the global south, this is a make or break issue. That the costs of fuel, the cost of food, the cost of fertilizer, the availability of fertilizer, which means next year's food, these are all extremely pressing issues. And if you see some of the countries who were already struggling with debt, who were already impacted by the pandemic, for them, this conflict, the knock-on effects of this conflict coming on top of that, has been really, I mean, damaging is a very, very mild word. On one particular issue, because of very polarized views of some countries, we were not able to bridge it on this particular occasion. Whereas, as our colleague pointed out from there, we were able to do that with, you know, a number of us were able to do that collectively in Bali. But obviously, the Bali situation today, for whatever reason, some countries feel cannot be extrapolated. In fact, this meeting was able to get everybody around the table. And as I said, you know, this is no easy task given the state of polarization in the world.
Today, when addressing the participants of the Foreign Minister meeting, President Modi, I think he presented balanced and responsible position of the country as the president of the G20. And in this address, he was not just speaking about some isolated individual situations, because the West is trying to divide the geopolitical picture into individual episodes. But in the address by Mr. Modi, he gave the assessment of the situation across the globe. When we are called to start negotiations, I do not remember anyone from the Western colleagues, anyone else from any other countries, talk to Ukraine to call them upon them to start negotiations, because Ukraine is encouraged to continue war. When Ukraine was ready to be engaged in negotiations last March, Ukraine was slapped on their wrists. Everyone knows this, the United States, the United Kingdom, and from what I understand, they told the Kiev regime, if Russians are ready to sign an agreement on resolving the situation, it means that we need to drag it out, that we need to make them weaker to achieve the victory on the battlefield, to defeat them on the battlefield, to achieve the strategic defeat of Russia.
Let's bring Gaurav back in on this. Gaurav, you know, what does this say about what's going to happen next between Russia and Ukraine? Because you've got Lavrov pretty much pointing a direct finger at the US and UK and saying that any possibility of normalization of peace talks between Russia and Ukraine have been hampered deliberately by the UK and the United States.
Shiv, this has been Russia's case all throughout, that Russia is actually fighting the United States and NATO. Ukraine is just a tool in between. Peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, they couldn't move forward because America and the UK didn't want it, according to Sergey Lavrov. So that's one part of the story. The second part is that even President Putin pointed out how Europe and America continue to arm Ukraine, and that's actually prolonging the war. That's prolonging the pain that people are facing. An effort should be, the global effort should be to bring about a consensus, negotiated settlement, dialogue, and that is not happening.
Yeah.
The war is actually being encouraged with more weapons being supplied to Ukraine. That's, of course, Russia's point of view. India's point of view constantly has been that India can play a role, but a settlement can only be found through dialogue. Hostilities need to stop. Dialogue is the way forward, and that is where the world needs to come together. But as External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar clearly pointed out, that the stance taken by the opposing sides are so diverse that it wasn't possible to bridge that gap today.